clearly, I guess we would all agree that how much money is actually going to go back to Atlantic City, to the Horsemen, to all the different organizations that have been promised money is important. And so when I went through ACR 1, I looked through it extensively, and I'm still looking. Can you tell me what the tax rate will be on whatever the revenue is that's generated?
Well, absolutely, you're right. The tax rate at this point will remain the same, 8%. In the enabling legislation, that's when we're going to set forth what those parameters will be in terms of an additional tax rate. Right now, we're arguing over money that we don't have. So in the event that the resolution passes, that the constitutional question passes, and then before that, before it even goes on the ballot, the legislature will have to determine what the tax rate will be on that revenue.
Well, then, are you aware that if you use an 8% tax rate off of the projected amount of revenue by Deutsche Bank, which is $500 million, which,
right,
by the way, is offset by $500 million lost in Atlantic City, but even presupposing it doesn't have that effect, at 8%, even if you did 50%, there'd be $250 million, which doesn't come close to the projected $450 million. How do you propose the bill and put out there for people as though you're going to get certain monies when the numbers just don't add up?
Well, because first steps first. And the fact is that the people have a right to make a decision about where they want gaming in the state. As far as the tax rate, it will change. It will not be 8%. And the fact is that we're going to have at least 2 properties in the state of New Jersey. All the experts indicate that it will be over $1 billion. So if the tax rate is struck accurately, you will have over $300 million a year.
Now, here's the only question I would pose to
What you need deeply, what you need very seriously, because without that revenue going to Atlantic City, you can't tell me where you're going to get these additional resources to bring value back to the real estate market in non-gaming development in Atlantic City. So it's not going to come from the state of New Jersey.
No, and
all right,
it
it's
doesn't
got to
have
come
to.
from
And
these properties.
one of the things that you're very well aware of is that all the studies indicate that the proposal that you have before us will do nothing less than kill Atlantic City.
That's your opinion.
That's not my opinion, sir.
Okay, here's what I'm going to ask for, and ask a question. Okay. When the question is, I'm not the speaker, but we're going to go through the chair as it relates to the back and forth. We're not going to
Thank
bicker.
you, Chair.
Go ahead.
Just to make sure everybody's clear, the studies, whether it's Stockton University, whether it's Christian Capital, whether it's the Chamber of Commerce, they have all concluded that a North Jersey casino will simply cannibalize Atlantic City, close 3 more casinos, put another 14,000 hardworking men and women out of work, and result in a net loss to the state than they're receiving right now. And so if we are to have an intelligent conversation, in other words, if we're going to say to the voters, we're about to amend our Constitution of the state of New Jersey, here are the facts. And what you're saying is we're not going to give them the facts. We're not going to tell them what the tax rate is. We're going to figure it out later. But we know that the proposed tax rate doesn't work.
Can I answer?
Of course.
When you
Shouldn't we hold this and make sure that we get it right before you put upon the taxpayers a bunch of empty, false promises about revenue that, one, is not statistically proven that it will even be generated, but number 2, you can't start telling people there's $450 million in revenue and divvying it up by $150 million, $150 million, another $150 million without a tax rate in place and then the analysis.
Well, there's through you,
Okay,
Chair.
so if you have an answer to that.
First of all, the 5-year moratorium which you supported and many others supported in terms of the legislature and the administration failed bitterly. We don't have North Jersey casinos at this time, yet the market fell apart. The Revel was a referendum on gaming, and the answer was a $2.5 billion investment, which the state supported in many ways. I don't want to get into the details, failed bitterly. That building sold at $83 million at bankruptcy court. So North Jersey or a study or a proposal did not destroy the investments that were made in Atlantic City and lost. That happened on your own, okay? Now, you don't present any alternative to what we're trying to do. We're trying to do a couple of things here, the people that agree with me. One is to save the gaming business in the state of New Jersey and to provide resources so that you can kickstart a renaissance that Atlantic City deserves to have. you've got to have some alternative. The dollars and resources have to be put back into Atlantic City, otherwise you will continue to fail. Even without these casinos that are being proposed, Moody's and Deutsche Bank and all the real experts in the field all indicate that the market is falling apart. You're going to lose 2, maybe 3 more without casinos in North Jersey. And to further my point, those customers do not frequent Atlantic City at this time. You've lost that market that we're trying to gain back for the state of New Jersey. They're already into Pennsylvania and to New York. So, true, it will pull stress, but I don't think in the long run, if we do something to save the gaming business for the state of New Jersey and also provide resources so that Atlantic City can be healthy fiscally again, and in light of the fact that the takeover is so imminent, you've got to look for some way of trying to help the state of New Jersey in terms of their effort in regaining tax revenue and also provide a lifeline to Atlantic City. We tried with internet gaming, it didn't work. We put the reform legislation in place, it did not work. We've had a state monitor in there for 4 or 5 years, and I sympathize with the city because they were getting rich based upon the revenue that was being actually shared by those casinos. It's not there anymore, Chris. It's not there anymore. We've got to replace that revenue.
Mr. Chair? There are a couple,
please.
yes, sir. There are a couple points that you made that are simply inaccurate, and I know it's not intentional. Yes, sir. One of them, for example, is you say Atlantic City was given 5 years with a moratorium. It took the state 3 years to even enact the laws that were supposed to allow Atlantic City the opportunity to transition into a more of a destination resort. 3 years. In the 4th year, you and others started holding hearings on North Jersey casinos. This, sir, is the 5th year. So any notion at all that that failed is simply inaccurate. The truth of the matter is, if you look at Las Vegas, they were very smart, and they realized that competitive gaming is coming up all around them. And they set on a path that took them a little over 10 years to transition Las Vegas from simply a gaming destination to a more full non-gaming resort. And what they did was they took where they're relying upon gaming revenue of 70%, 30% non-gaming, in a little over 10 years they're able to turn that around. And it actually is now at 75% non-gaming revenue, 25% gaming revenue. And when you talk about experts, and I appreciate the fact that you're acknowledging Moody's and you're acknowledging Deutsche Bank as experts, and all of their statements and what they have said is that North Jersey casinos are going to simply cannibalize Atlantic City. In other words, you are correct that there will be some of those gamers who leave North Jersey now to go across the border. But there are not enough of them to overcome the loss of revenue that the state will see. And as I said from the beginning, this isn't North versus South. This is something where we should all be geared towards making sure that we get it right so that families in New Jersey are looked out for. And so it comes back to my original question. If we're supposed to have an intelligent debate and we're supposed to have an intelligent conversation about amending our state's constitution, why would we not be honest with the people and tell them what the tax rate is going to be? Because right now, when you list it at 8% and then you start telling other interest groups how much money they're going to get out of $450 million, even if you tax it at 50%, that's not accurate based upon your experts, Deutsche Bank as well as Moody's. But at 8%, it barely comes to $80 million, which certainly would not even come close. So couldn't we hold this bill, have an open and honest debate about what the percentage should be, and then we can have an honest, not a rush it through the legislature conversation, but an honest discussion on so the public knows what they're voting on.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. I hate to take all this time, but it's important. First of all, Las Vegas did not face the crisis. The city of Las Vegas did not face the crisis that Atlantic City is presently immersed in. Okay? They didn't have thousands of people unemployed. They didn't have their tax base falling apart. Yes, they had a depression in terms of the revenue that they were used to having, but in no way can you compare the two places. Two, you don't have an alternative. You're arguing about a tax rate that we haven't set yet. anybody that has been in the discussions about this referendum realizes that those casinos, if they ever do become a reality, will not have the same tax rate that exists in Atlantic City. In fact, Atlantic City got a free ride. When Atlantic City was making huge money, billions and billions of dollars, they got a real good deal at 8%. Pennsylvania's paying over 50, and so is New York. Why would we not do the same thing here? Why would we just want to, have a charade in terms of putting casinos in North Jersey
Well, that's what I'm asking you.
without
Excuse
taxing?
me. Sorry.
Because this is not the proper place to put the tax rate. That goes in the enabling legislation, which we have not done yet. That's your argument for a later date. At this point, we're talking about not blocking the voters' right, not blocking any longer the voters' right, and even if they're against it or for it, to make that decision. And that's what's been going on for the last 4 or 5 years. We have people in the legislature that have been blocking the absolute right of an individual to make that decision. I'm not standing in their way. If you had a real alternative, I would be gladly consider it.
Mr. Chair.
No, along with that, Chris, you're blaming that we had hearings. That's our responsibility to listen to people from all specters on this issue. So I think we did the right thing, and I think in retrospect, it was best that we didn't enact it a few years ago because the city fell apart on its own.
Mr. Chair, and I'll be brief. It goes
Do you have
back
a question?
Yes,
Or
sir.
okay. You have a question? See the question.
It goes back to when you say that the point of this is to let the voters decide on whether or not they want North Jersey casinos. And if you are asking them to make that decision, wouldn't you want it to be an intelligent decision? And wouldn't you want to have an intellectual conversation about how this is going to affect or hurt the state of New Jersey so that every person going to the polls knows exactly what they're voting upon? In other words, a lot of time there are these carnival barkers, and coming from Atlantic City, I've seen them often. And they promise a lot, but when you get in the tent, there's really nothing there. And so instead of leaving hollow promises potentially to someone who may think, hey, I'm getting 2%, and they told me there's going to be $450 million, and the reality is that's not so, wouldn't we want to hold this bill and give an opportunity to have that honest, open, intellectual debate so that we get it right, not just for the people.
I'm going to sum it up when he's done. Okay.
And
First of all, we have time
Thank
between now and November to put into place enabling legislation that will be required to work with this constitutional amendment. And that will occur in a campaign. When the campaign takes place, you're going to have the right, like everyone else, to discuss whether or not this is appropriate or not. At this point, I think that you're spinning your wheels, Chris. You really are.
Well,
because if you had a real alternative, I would jump all over it. Because I want to see Atlantic City survive just like you do.
Mr. Chairman,
But I don't see that alternative.
But based upon his recent comments, I think it's important
On what
that I
recent
ask
comments? I will give you all the time you want to lay out your very articulate and passionate views on this subject, but the banter back and forth isn't really asking questions. It's just allowing you to express those opinions. You'll be given that opportunity. If you have any specific questions for the sponsor, please ask.
I do, and this should wrap it up. And I appreciate your deference and your patience. This is obviously an important issue, and thank you. There is an alternative plan, and I want to share it with you and then ask you, based upon this plan, would you be willing to wait? And while Atlantic City certainly has suffered in the...
Chris, I'm sorry. What's the plan?
Oh, okay. Well, that's where I was headed to. While Atlantic City certainly has suffered under the current recession and as well as convenience gaming coming up around its borders, and the gaming industry has taken the hit, despite the uncertainty in the market brought to it by this discussion of North Jersey casinos during the 5 years there's supposed to be a moratorium, over $350 million of private sector investment has come into Atlantic City, over $350 million. That includes places like Margaritaville, Bass Pro Outlet, the Conference Center. Now, given the opportunity to continue to bring in that type of investment and allowing Atlantic City the opportunity to transition monetarily, One of the biggest mistakes that the bodies made years ago, about 5 years ago, was when they put a time limit on it. They said, in other words, we're going to give Atlantic City 5 years, and then we're going to open gaming to North Jersey. Well, by putting a time limit on it, anybody with major investment is going to wait to see if the state is foolish enough to open a North Jersey casino and compete with itself and take 43% of the people who gamble there. So it should have been based upon, we're going to wait until the casino revenue changes, just like they did in Vegas, and allow it to come to the point where Atlantic City's non-gaming revenue is 65 or 70%, and then the gaming revenue is 25 or 30. And I will share with you that you could open a casino in Camden County at that point, because Atlantic City, and on behalf of the state, would be in a position to withstand intrastate gaming. So there is a plan in place. It is starting to work. There is over $350 million, and all that you will do is turn it around and jeopardize the improvements made by Atlantic City, and at the same time jeopardize the revenue for the state and all the people. And so I would ask you, given the fact that there is a plan and that there is an alternative, would you be willing to hold this bill, have an intelligent conversation, and move forward?